G'day, guys. Welcome to this week's HashItOut. I'm CW, and joining me once again, we have Noah and Armenio. How are you guys?
Doing great.
Crazy week.
Yeah, another week in crypto, isn't it? We've seen the SEC and in particular Gary going on the warpath with some announcements and rhetoric and all kinds of shenanigans. So let's hash that out this week.
Yeah, it's kind of more of the same. USA is just clamping down on sketchiness wherever they can, really. There might have been a few announcements this week, but I saw that Coinbase is going to be delisting Binance USD in 2 weeks, I think it is. Yeah, what else is going on? I haven't really kept tabs this week.
Oh, no, there's some quotes.
Yeah,
from,
that quote about BTC basically being
that's
the
right.
overlord and everything else is a security and all kinds of, I don't know.
How could I forget that one? Everything else is a security.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big blanket statement, isn't it?
It's ridiculous. That's the only word. The crypto industry in the US is absurd and ridiculous, in my opinion. It's like, hey, come in to talk to us, and then as soon as companies do, it's like, we're going after you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
You open up your books and we sting you on things that there's no precedent for, and we're starting it here. But one thing I find fascinating, and it kind of frustrating and pisses me off at the same time also, is how they can basically make up the rules on the run. There's no precedent, there's no law. It's basically enforcement through regulation, but no one knows the rules. So like you said, you go in there, talk to them with good intention, and they turn around and slap a $30 million fine in the case of Kraken.
Yeah, pretty wild. It's one of those things we just have to see. I think at least people that have their eyes open at least recognize that the industry is kind of under siege at the moment.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right?
Crypto,
I'm not
baby.
I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do about it or what they're going to do about crypto. So, have fun. Good luck.
Yeah, we also saw CoinEx announce that they will not be available to United States customers, which is a bummer for us ergonauts in the US, but we will find a way.
Yeah, it's quite disappointing to see. Obviously, it's a big hit to one of our larger listings, one of our centralized listings there. So when there's a will, there's a way. That's the thing. Like it's crypto, so jump on some VPNs or do whatever you need to do to be able to sort of do some trading. But there's numerous other options. There's KuCoin, TradeOgre, P2P. Like, how do you stop these systems? Yes, you can enforce a little sort of thing, but on one hand, you talk about like the US and sort of cranking down on like enforcement through regulation, and then you've got a jurisdiction such as like Hong Kong, and just recently announced that they want to open up things and provide the ability for Chinese mainland, I think it was, or Hong Kong citizens. Can't remember exact wording, but it's allowing them to be able to sort of participate in crypto markets. So it's a funny situation.
Welcome to jurisdictional arbitrage, right? The game is back on.
Yeah.
Crypto lived for a long time like that, actually, where had companies kind of had to play whack-a-mole for a while in terms of where they set up shop.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think the industry's proven it's very valuable. So I think at the peak it was a 3 trillion market cap when all those all the shenanigans going on in the DeFi world and whatnot. But yeah, it's a quite significant amount of money, isn't it? And it can't be ignored. So you mentioned like jurisdictional sort of arbitrage opportunities. There will always be an entity willing to participate in this, because you can see what happened in El Salvador. They bring in some sort of favorable sort of conditions for investment and things, and numerous like industries in that country have come to the forefront. So travel and investment, mining, infrastructure for the electricity, all kinds of bits and pieces. So I think you can see the favorable side of participating in this industry there.
It's hard to regulate something with an incentive.
Yeah,
and I feel like we've talked about this before, but even with these attempts at sort of clamping down, Ergo is positioned pretty well to just sort of carry on and keep chugging as usual. For United States users, there might be some headache and confusion, honestly, and fear. People may not want to be involved, but the underlying sort of technology, it's resilient and it'll keep doing its thing for now, at least, and into the future.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch. Anyway, the whole, I don't know, fear and uncertainty that's being thrown at the industry. Who knows at this point? Then you have to ask the question, okay, they create a regulation. Then you have the second question, which is enforcement, right? You can make whatever rules you want, but then at the end of the day, you have to be able to enforce them in order for them to be, feasible. And then that opens a whole nother question, like how do you regulate a lot of this personal computing? And that's good luck.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages, I guess, of Ergo is having GPU mineable, so GPU cards. It's a consumer grade product, and you can jump into, I don't know what stores do you have over there, Best Buy or whoever sells them, and pick up a card off the shelf. And it's, you mentioned having a rule, then enforcing it. China banning mining is a perfect example of that. The government announces a statewide ban on mining infrastructure, mining coming out of China, and what are they now? They're still the highest hash rate, I believe. Or
even when that was a thing, there was a lot of people just, okay, I'll run a BPM and my ping time slows down a little bit.
Yep. But you're still participating in the network. You're still having a little bit less of an odd there because your time's reduced a little, but you're still in there participating. You're running the lottery there, and I'm sure numerous miners in mainland China are doing quite well.
It's just fascinating. Anyway, I guess on one hand, I guess, sometimes we need to think like we're on the other side of the table. If I were in the enforcement side, I'd go after a lot of ridiculous projects because there are a lot of ridiculous projects. And then the other is the liquidity is very concentrated, right?
Yep.
Kind of the beast behind the, let's say, centralized beast that decentralization tried to kill just moved to market access and liquidity.
Yep.
And then there's a lot of disproportionate power that exchanges have. We saw FTX blow up, and everyone's in shock about that. But the reality is you can't see inside a black box, and exchanges have attack vectors that nobody can see.
Yeah. And that's a scary thing, I guess, for the industry as well, because we keep harping on about black boxes and everything like that. So what does that actually mean? There's lots of things going on behind the scenes. You can't see what's going on. They could be scalping orders. They could be front running. They could be running numerous sort of things to disadvantage the end user. This is all alleged.
Kinds of stuff.
Yeah, but no one knows because it is a black box. So there's a lot of allegations out there and potential ways for them to profit on the end user and the trades. And I think I can't remember who it was it Bittrex or something back in the day? There was so basically front running and liquidating shorts and longs and all kinds of shenanigans going on. So it'd be very, very interesting to see inside sort of like a trade engine there and see what shenanigans are going on.
It's the same problem, right? If there's an incentive, it's oftentimes very hard to stop.
Yeah. And even if you're scraping a couple of hundred sats or 100 sats off every order in regards to BTC trades or it's a little amount, but a lot of volume, sort of. So it will add up quite significantly.
Wouldn't it be nice if a user could step into that role and remove the centralized middleman in a decentralized way? Wouldn't that be a
the
cool
ramping
idea?
is always the problem. That's always, been the main bottleneck, or, in some degrees, the noose that this industry could hang on is the ability to move from the traditional system into kind of the blockchain world and then back. Those are, I guess, choke points.
Yeah, and that's one thing I dare say regulators will always have their hand on the throat, or the potential to have their hand on the throat in that respect, because you're dealing with entities who are heavily regulated in regards to sort of the banking situation and things. But that's where, like, the P2P aspect, like BISC and local Bitcoins, unfortunately, local Bitcoins has sort of disappeared now. But that sort of P2P trading network where you're providing a service, but it's decentralized, decentralized on-off ramp sort of situation. So, yeah, hopefully see a lot more of that pop up.
Yeah, I was going to mention BISC as well. I know I've mentioned it before, but if things in the United States do get really tight, I think that is a good option for users here. There's hardly any liquidity on BISC for Ergo at the moment, but if you leave an offer up there for long enough, somebody will step in, and it's a good sort of underappreciated alternative, I think.
Yeah.
No, it's a small space. That's the reality of it. If you look at the primary inflows, outflows, especially in like the US, it's a very small, concentrated space. There's only a few actors, right? And that in a way doesn't make it that hard to attack.
Yeah, like I said, that concentration of liquidity and people wanting to extract that into traditional finance or into fiat. You're restricted there. So it's an interesting point because, seeing that play out long term, that's it's a difficult one for the industry to sort of overcome that.
Oh, there's a part of me that thinks, maybe it's a good thing, right? Maybe it'll push things in a real direction.
Yeah.
We see a lot of fluff and nonsense, crypto.
Yeah.
And, if we go back to kind of the first principles, how do we create more peer-to-peer exchanges, economies, businesses, transactions that are smart contract based? Yeah. Maybe net, it kind of resets the insanity of the crypto space.
I know we've spoken about this on a previous hack, and that HashItOut, not too sure exactly which one, but conversing in terms of sats or nanoergs or micro amounts of coin X sort of thing, because you're not thinking in US dollars. You're thinking about like a coin value that's crypto related, and putting a fiat value on that sort of thing kind of undermines why we're all here. Because if you're thinking about this is going to cost me $10 or 15 nanoerg or whatever it equates to, you know what I mean? Like that's pretty funny in that respect. And hopefully a lot of people start thinking about that, because you are then focusing more in the industry then as well.
Yeah, if it's going to be a type of decentralized money, or at least even a backing to, other decentralized monies, there needs to be adoption there. There needs to be use, velocity. And I have to say that one of my favorite crypto communities is Monero, just because they've done a really good job of, I'd say, other than Bitcoin, they're probably the most evolved and actually saying, okay, we're going to actually create money systems and P2P type ramping.
Yeah. Something we can look at and hopefully try and replicate and take the pros and look at the cons and see how we can do it better in our ecosystem also.
Yeah, I have to tip my hat to that. I think that, one nice thing about privacy coins is where they stand.
Yeah, there's no pretending there.
Yeah.
There's no bullshitting.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
The comment from Gary about there being or Bitcoin being the only true cryptocurrency or something like that.
Mhm.
We can only guess, but for it's frustrating him saying that, but on another hand, it's like for the most part, he's not even wrong.
Well, it's interesting because initially, right, you had Bitcoin, and exchanges grew around Bitcoin.
Yep.
A lot of like the initial infrastructure of this industry grew around Bitcoin. Like it grew, because of Bitcoin, to use Bitcoin. And, you can still say there was some centralization problems that reappeared. You could still say, even back in the day, you could look at like the Gox hack and issues with the industry. But at some point it flipped. It flipped to where at this point, exchanges act like projects are supposed to be subservient to them.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? Like
the chicken and egg problem. And it's like, okay, let's say I have a exchange and I'm going to build my reserves or my, asset side of my balance sheet based on coins that I potentially trade and have the ability to influence and hold. And, then at the end of the day, I hold like a major stake in some crazy dog coin, but there's a lot of liquidity on the market. You have to say, okay, like the market itself is, in my opinion, somewhat predatory and tainted. I'm just going to say that, because, the money changers, are kind of in power because there's very few points of serious liquidity in this industry. And the entities that are in that position know that. Right. I think one of the most interesting parts of FTX, looking at it, is how, they were offering, some projects one listing price, right, which oftentimes is in the moon.
And we just saw a tweet from Sasha, I believe, saying that they were charged, or they were going to be charged 1.5 million. Sasha from Waves recently. So that's
they have their own little VC arm that's making their own little decentralized projects that they're basically whitelisting on that exchange. Yeah. And so it's like, well, now you have a certain gatekeeper into the, let's say, liquidity access, which, is important for a market. If you list on a large exchange, you're going to probably have greater access to users, greater liquidity depth. Right now that's very centralized.
Yeah,
just is what it is. And so that opens up additional attack vectors. And, then you get like exchange centric infrastructure, like I'm going to have, Armenio smart chain and Armenio VC that's going to, launch projects on Armenio smart chain, and then they're going to list on Armenio Dex. And like you've created this whole umbrella organization.
Yeah.
Potentially you could very easily sway things towards your own products is something as simple as putting it on your UI, right?
Yeah. Having it on your launch screen when someone logs in, or, something.
Yeah, you can start direct internally. And, so in my opinion, like the main reason why Bitcoin is different is because Bitcoin didn't have to deal with all the assholes that came after Bitcoin.
Yeah, true. Like I said, the industry was built around it. The exchanges were built around it, and I don't think if I were going to start a crypto exchange, I'm going to still be subservient to Bitcoin. I'd probably still be subservient to a lot of the higher cap cryptocurrencies, to where it's open source code. I would want to integrate them and offer trading to that immediately. Mm-hmm. And then, how do new projects, quote unquote, join or do that? Usually, you have to go through some crazy gauntlet where a lot of the times, if a project, let's say I started a new chain, I would usually start in some, exchange that's way out in the boonies, right? Maybe some Chinese exchange that'll, help me out.
maybe wash trade a little bit so I can step to the next one and then step to the next one. And at some point, become popular or big enough that, either I can pay for access to a larger exchange, or they may want some tokens from me in order to get listed, or, you kind of step towards higher liquidity, right? But there's a lot of fake shit involved in potentially creating that. Like I could go to some off the books exchange that's way out in the boonies and say, okay, well, 0 maker taker fee. I'm going to overheat your trade engine and just toss it from one hand to the next. And,
dollar value for volume, 24 hours.
Yeah. Sometimes you have like these crazy coins pop up out of nowhere, and it's like, they have a $4 million market cap and $40 million of daily volume.
Yeah. The funniest thing I've seen is when the day that there's like a power outage or something, and you see the bot shut off and the volume just drops to 0 and then it pops back up.
Someone restarted the PC.
Yeah.
Well, so in that sense, I do think that Bitcoin had a advantage. Honestly, that a lot of the crap that grew around Bitcoin, whether it's exchange wise or even a lot of the crypto media is pretty let's say not so open, fair, and educational.
But with the line that Gensler's taking, it's like if that's truly his stance, then it's like innovation just can't happen here, right? And what I hope is that just because I'm in the United States and it's relevant to me, what I hope is that it's like in the spirit of Bitcoin or something along those lines. But
without a legal precedent, someone will sue him or not sue him personally, but the SEC. And ultimately, if it's not, if a law isn't put forth before Congress and shit, it's just making up rules on the fly and changing the goalposts mid-game sort of thing. And until some precedent is set, then you'll keep getting away with it, unfortunately, which is the shit thing about it. And it's one thing. Like one question I have then is, if Bitcoin is all the holy sort of the cryptocurrency and all that sort of stuff, what about BTC forks, Litecoin, Dogecoin, all these sort of things? It's the underlying infrastructure is the code based on Bitcoin. One thing that sort of I like about the Ergo sort of side of it as well is every argument for Bitcoin applies to Ergo as well. And like we're allowing more sort of expressive sort of things with smart contracts and having that extended UTXO model and things like that. But ultimately, fair launch, everything like that, it's everything applies to Ergo as well.
I don't see how you can launch in today's environment where projects are supposed to be subservient to exchanges to get liquidity, market access, and be able to, in essence, grow.
Yeah.
And not have a entity to represent you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something I directly deal with. I've seen the contracts, so I can say that if you're listing on an exchange, you have a counterparty.
Yeah, right? That's what I was about to say. Can you explain that sort of process for people who may not necessarily understand?
So before the Ergo Foundation, the entity was established, we were talking to our friends over at KuCoin, right? And, we were talking about Ergo, negotiating, the terms of the listing, We get to the point where we're going to execute it and, somebody has to take liability. Somebody has to, right? So I'm talking to Alex. I'm like, so Alex, is Russia, can they basically export you if there's an issue? Because, is that a non-extradition country from this jurisdiction?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I would have a problem. And he's like, well, what about you? And he's like, well, I guess, I might never get to go on vacations if something went wrong. I guess I'll be the, counterparty for that listing. Right. And that's insane. That's insane. That's the situation you just forced the industry in if you can't have some legal entity to absorb some of that liability, right?
Yeah.
To kind of hide behind the point of that structure.
Yeah.
And then, so if that blows up, oops, I got to check my list before I go on vacation or something, right? That's insane to think about.
Yeah, it's just absurd. It's like,
that's absurd.
What are you supposed to do? It's the chicken and the egg. Yeah.
It's the chicken and the egg. So what do? I sign the paper. I'm technically, was at least the counterparty, which, that's a lot of volume being traded every day. That's a stress. I don't want to think about that. If, some crazy thing happened, that is insane to think about.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did it because, I was in a better situation than him.
Yeah.
And it was like, you set up an entity and not put ourselves in that situation. Got family, you got life. Yeah. Maybe a good idea to put some buffer in between.
But people
and so you also have market making requirements, right? That's a part of the package. It's like, okay, we need liquidity on our exchanges because number one, that's how people trade. You need a certain market depth. Otherwise, if there's no liquidity, somebody market buys, they might accidentally send it to the moon. And there's, some real information asymmetries at play. If I were to sign Ergo with a major exchange and I knew and nobody else knew, I would have like a vector to potentially front run people, right? Yeah. That's a problem. And, I can't even say people care, right? You can say, the best person is selling on the top is always Vitalik. You could look at like FTM and Phantom, and their foundation is openly saying, hey, look at what we did and how we increased the treasury trading against you guys.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's not good.
Vitalik's a great trader. He's always, I think, a couple of times now he's picked the top perfectly. So
he is the top.
It's one thing that gets me, and like knowing the story that you just sort of conveyed there about centralized exchanges and the counterparty requirement and things like that. And you often hear people touting from different ecosystems about where the fairest launch and blah, blah, blah and whatnot. But
we don't
ultimately,
we don't know who our market makers are, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Stupid. But stupid in my opinion.
Ultimately, there's someone behind the scenes who is being that counterparty, who's taking that risk on and providing market making like liquidity, et cetera. So yeah, it's quite comical in that respect. But ultimately, hopefully videos like this where we discuss sort of what goes on behind the scenes there, it does educate people and brings that awareness and makes people stop and think about sort of how centralized these decentralized systems need to be able to be listed on a centralized exchange.
No, it's problematic. The exchange itself has attack vectors. The project potentially has information asymmetry in ways they could, attack the community or, basically be at an advantage against their own community, right? Yeah. That's not the ideal situation. It kind of is what it is for now. Yeah. Like, I can't exactly go to a big central exchange and say, hey, you guys should change your policies, right?
Yeah, change your policies.
You're not Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, projects are in a subservient position. Exchanges rather than exchanges are more of just intermediary. That's more passive and says, hey, if I'm going to be an intermediary, I should try to support as much as I can because then I get, potential volume. Mm-hmm. That's a profit vector for them. That's simple.
Yeah, and if these exchanges have market making requirements where foundation has to cough up a bunch of liquidity, and then you have an FTX situation, it's
massively. Like, yeah, that was one of the worst parts of FTX, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
You had a ton of projects that had to fulfill FTX's market making requirements, which were steep. Mm-hmm. They were steep, right? And that means you have to keep a certain amount of coins on both sides of the trade on that exchange in order to keep the books liquid to their requirements. Otherwise, they'll delist you. And so then it's like,
yep.
That's like a hostage situation. If you look at how it played out, right? They signed with projects and said, okay, Noah Coin has to, keep, X amount of daily volume and X amount of liquidity on our books. And if Noah Coin doesn't, then we're going to take Noah Coin's, deposit or
treasury that he has to hold on there to be able to list it and things.
Exactly. And then
it's so bonkers, dude. It's like
bonkers as hell. It really is.
Oh my god.
I just hope that all this shit highlights all these shortcomings and things, like gets people thinking about all this bullshit we're talking about. Like, yeah, it gets me fired up and somewhat passionate.
Oh, I love the I love the technology. I do not like the industry.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a perfect way to summarize
Crypto
it.
baby.
Crypto
baby.
So when Joe Dogcoin, when's that going to be released? After Joe Coin?
Who knows?
Everyone keeps asking, so soon.
Yeah, but the good reality that we need to look at is the world is bigger than the US.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not going to kill the technology. It could potentially stunt it, slow it a little bit, but then again, maybe it'll also create kind of a pendulum back towards first principles, right? Like we've been on the crazy
in times of struggle, the revolutionary spirit gets fanned a little bit, We'll see. I think it might sort of spur people on.
But looking at
people like to do things that they're told they're not supposed to do.
In mass.
Yeah.
It's very funny,
Yeah.
There's a lot of good people in the crypto industry, right? I don't want to say that there's not. There is a lot of good people in the crypto industry, but because it kind of grew around a single source, it's very concentrated.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen major players over and over and over again that abuse that position of concentrated power. Kind of the point.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, actually, because I think we saw that last sort of cycle as well and hit the point, like the peak and everything, and then all the ICO mania and all that sort of shit just sort of like the ass fell out of it. And even this time, saw the shortcomings like mining or the centralized side of it. Even now, like with a downturn, like with FTX exploding and all these sort of things where the downturn highlighted all the stuff that was going on, the hypothecation and utilizing user funds in case of Celsius and all this sort of stuff, and not being able to cover expenditures and withdrawals and you name it. So hopefully the industry learns. We know it's not going to. People will start jumping on that profitability train and to the moon, and everyone's happy and excited again. But hopefully the industry starts thinking about all these things.
And I think that it's also true that in terms of, I don't know, bear markets tend to concentrate conviction.
Yeah.
Right. And everyday people kind of unplug, or even if they don't sell anything, they just kind of tune out for a while until things are more exciting. Yeah. And then you have people that are still focused, still building, more interested in like the long-term potential rather than the candle of the day.
Yeah. And that's what I love about Ergo as well, is the building that's going on. I think it was highlighted with the recent Ergo hack, all the DeFi options we have now, and it's just growing. There's things popping out of nowhere, and it's just exciting for the ecosystem. And we've got to, I think you said there, it confirms your conviction in something. And I think a lot of people are drawn to Ergo for that, because it does tend to convict your mindset into like the first principles concepts and everything along those lines. And people are happy to be here and build and utilize this technology that's at hand.
Yeah, Alex and I have actually been, initially one of the first things we wanted to do is create the Ergo manifesto, put it out there, and try to create like a North Star, right?
Mm.
This is like the ideal of what the ecosystem could be. And we've been talking about potentially creating like a chapter 2 for finance, more finance oriented.
Yeah.
How that could be built properly in a way that protects people, delivers value, has clear assumptions. There's a lot of insane things in DeFi that have come and gone over the years.
Yeah, it's the Wild West. At least it is for now. We'll see.
Yeah, and
yeah, I do think there are projects and people out there that have principles, right? That are relatively self-regulating, and then you have others that, they're building some crazy casino games.
it's not Grand Gambit or Night Owl.
Not. I guess it depends how big of a degenerate you are, right? Manage your risk.
Yeah. One thing that keeps crossing my mind, and it's basically like with Gary's sort of crackdown and rhetoric, and it's basically proof of work versus proof of stake, I think, at this point in time, and how that is defined sort of going forward with regulation and things like that. It'd be very, very interesting to see how this plays out, because I think that's the way they're going to sort of start attacking things personally. But that's just my thoughts and speculation on my side and where my mind sort of runs to. And I think, once again, to use that word conviction, proof of work it's proven. It's we all know the pros and cons and everything of it, but ultimately utilizing real world cost and everything like that to secure or provide security for these networks with consumer grade hardware, it's pretty rock solid there in that respect.
Let's see. I have no idea. And, the reality is I don't think I'm going to be able to influence the outcome. Therefore, it's not in my power. And to be honest, I don't really care. Like what's going to happen there is going to happen. And I think that Ergo will probably keep building, right? Yeah. So, there will probably be a lot of noise. And I imagine that the reality is there is some low hanging fruit in our industry in terms of potential regulatory problems. So, at least I think we're higher up the tree, right? And we also have no foothold in U.S. markets.
Yeah.
So that's their potential that it's like, okay, they're not going to potentially cut like expense costs of listing, or that type of thing, because you could potentially take a massive hit if you're a small project and you move into a big market. That's not always cheap.
Mm.
Like that's one of the worst things about FTX, I think, is there was actually good projects that definitely took some kind of hit.
Having raised funds and everything, and like I mentioned, having to have, or one of the requirements, storing treasuries on their platform, bankrupt them instantly, basically. So it's sad to see. It's very unfortunate.
So I don't know, net, these are peer-to-peer systems that are meant to eliminate third parties, and there's more to do to harden that.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that happens organically or as more of a reaction from an overstep, I just hope it happens. That's why I'm here.
Day by day.
That's
it's like you said earlier, like it's very easy to get caught up in the green candle of the day, but I don't know, after a while it just gets boring, in my opinion. Like there's better things to do than stare at charts all day, but that's just me.
I'm just excited to see all the cool stuff being built, like not only here in Ergo, but elsewhere. Like take a concept and apply it to Ergo, and things might not be necessarily economically viable and things, but it might be a great idea on a different like account model or something along those lines. But the technology here on Ergo allows that to be built, and that's a cool thing. Like you have an idea, how do I apply this and how can I utilize this technology to make it come true? And the flexibility and everything that this sort of ecosystem provides is pretty exciting.
I think at the end of the day, it's got to be a principle over project, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look out far enough into the future in terms of like what P2P systems can offer and how that could benefit people, I just hope one follows first principles, gets adoption, works, right? Ergo or not, I think that's a net positive. So that's why I'm here.
Exactly. seen cool stuff being built in the ecosystem or the industry as a whole. And then once again, driving that open source mentality and principled sort of approach, and being able to utilize someone else's technology, their concepts, rearranging contracts, utilizing them, and everything like that. So it's being able to sort of build these resilient systems, and utilizing and handing over that technology for others to sort of utilize as well. It's amazing to watch and drive this innovation forward.
I think that's part of the beauty of open source.
Yeah, exactly. The cool thing now is that there are a number of projects that have never been finished, and the tooling and the ecosystem is getting to a point now where I think we'll start seeing progress being made. Like, I think there was a last minute Ergo hack submission from some project from over a year ago, like one of the first Ergo hacks.
Yep.
And the guy came back and he finished it. And it's like, man. And in his submission, he talked about how like the tooling is just at a point now where it's just things are just so much easier than they were not even that long ago.
And hopefully that's something that we can carry forward, for a long time. Even let's say if the Ergo Foundation, becomes an outdated entity, hopefully the community carries that. Open source code is critical. It's why things came after Bitcoin, right?
Yep. Yeah,
because
exactly.
there's a lot of good ideas out there. There's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of mind share, and that's not going to go away. Like, Gary can have fun, trying to play in his kingdom, but that's not going away.
Yeah. That whole cypherpunk ethos as well, where you kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. It's like that whole "you can't tell me what to do" or anything sort of mentality. And even if you do tell me what to do, I'm going to do whatever I want anyway. So piss off. So
I think, I like to look at it really from almost the perspective of like UTXO. It's all about managing your assumptions in your local state.
Yeah.
And if we can build a system where Noah has solid assumptions in his local state, and CW does as well, and I do as well, we can voluntarily transact with each other. We'll value, potentially good services. We can trade with each other in an environment where we're managing our local state. Everybody loves to talk about decentralization. Nobody likes to run hardware and actually have a local state, unfortunately. But that's a whole nother thing that I think we can make it easier for people too. But it's also a matter of teaching them to understand that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, people always want the easy option. Everyone's kind of attuned to the centralized actors in Web 2, like Google and things, where one click and you've got all the services, and Apple, and everyone knows how all these big tech companies sort of run. Looking at it from a decentralized perspective, you having to own what you do and what you run and how you interact with things, it's all on you personally. And having that personal liability and accountability to yourself, I think a lot of people have to come to terms with that to be able to interact with these systems, because there is no middleman, there's no referee, there's no gatekeeper who you can go, Joe just rugged me and Joe coin's gone to zero, and unfortunately I had 1,000 erg in there and now I'm on the street, sort of thing. So I have to be accountable. I have to know my assumptions. I have to know what I'm investing in. That's just one perspective, but utilizing infrastructure, so running nodes and Oracle pools and DEX bots, all this sort of off-chain infrastructure, it builds resiliency in the system, because you don't have an entity like the SEC pointing the finger at a cloud computing system or a hosting company and things like that, saying, shut this down or we're going to sue you for running this infrastructure. So you're not going to go and do that to 1,000, 2,000, 100,000 people that's distributed around the world to shut down these systems. It's just impossible to enforce.
Even something as simple as multi-sig, right? That's something that Chris Ray's been pushing for this week. And we saw some great videos out there. putting multi-sig on your own wallet, it increases your assumptions, right? That's better security environment. There's a lot of little things that users can do, and guess what? They are inconvenient.
Yeah.
But that's literally the point of decentralization, and it's not made to be efficient, right? Replicating the same system around the world is not efficient, but what it does do is it distributes kind of the power across actors. So if you want to maximize your security in a P2P network, be a good peer.
Yeah, well, that's very good way to put it. Is there anything else we want to touch on, gentlemen? We're coming up to time here once again. Time flies when you're having fun and talking about all these sort of.
Sure. Well, I think one strategy that we kind of deployed, looking at the state of is just Rosenbridge, right? Having the ability to access liquidity without needing anybody's permission, and trying to create distributed assumptions to where let's say it's relatively safe. You know how it can fail. You can watch it fail in real time. If it does, you have open source code there, clear assumptions, trying to kind of move around some of the centralized entities.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to see that roll out. I think that long term, if we see Rosen successful, and we have exchange from multiple ecosystems, it will be very easy to transact with the Ergo ecosystem, or wrapped tokens from the Ergo ecosystems and other environments. So at that point, whoever's left after Gary's done burning everything down, we could potentially bridge with.
Yeah.
And so it kind of disintermediates certain actors that are not always fun to deal with.
That's just quickly. That's a good point actually. Is having that access to liquidity through Rosen into different ecosystems and utilizing their market access and whatnot. One thing that can do then is potentially create arbitrage opportunities. Market conditions can be favorable or unfavorable. People utilizing that sort of discrepancy in prices and things like that. So it opens up not only market access, but trade access, multiple new markets and everything like that as well. So it's very exciting for the ecosystem. Yeah,
and I'll add, I'm very excited about the ease of, or the increase in easy UX.
Yeah.
And things like, we're going to be having the node syncing a lot quicker, and just we've got Ross working on the the TV node, and he's been talking about doing the phone node, and things like that make running that annoying infrastructure that you like you described, Joe. Anything we can do to make it a little bit annoying, but not so annoying that people don't take the time to do it. And I feel like we're moving in a good direction recently, and I'm very excited to see.
That's life, though, in my opinion. It's like, you want to be responsible for your local state, you're going to have to work.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's.
But I don't want to work. I want someone else to work for me. Okay, well then you're trusting them.
Well, the point that I was trying to make is like, I think a lot of people
it could be faster, easier.
Don't know how to use the terminal, so like having the green button to do their own work just makes it more accessible. And when people have a way of doing the thing in a way that sort of they can read and understand what they're supposed to do, I think people are happy to jump on board.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember bootstrapping the node from a jar, and then you look at Saturgo and the difficult level.
Yeah, it's great. It's amazing.
Green button. Yeah. Green button. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's a perfect example. Utilizing the jar and, like Noah said, opening the terminal. People see this and not knowing commands, and it's so foreign to people who are interacting with GUIs and things all the time. And having a executable, double click on that and you're up and running, syncing a full node in a couple of seconds in regards to utilizing Saturgo, that's fantastic. So
yeah, and in the near future, it sounds like Saturgo will have ErgoPay integrated. So
that'd be awesome.
You know, like people like myself who I've been using Nautilus for, or the mobile wallet, it's like you don't even need to rely on the light wallets anymore if you want to use some of the dApps in the ecosystem, or in the future when it's integrated. But yeah, things are moving in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I've had a couple of miners reach out to me in regards to wanting DApp connector integration into Saturgo so they can interact with DeFi. One of those was second time mining, so shout out, mate, on that front. But running that own infrastructure, wanting to own, having that responsibility and that added security of running a full node and then interacting with DeFi and things like that, away from browser-based wallets and things. So it's having. I was really excited when someone reached out to me and actually asked that question: does a full node have DApp connector? It's
a great question.
I'm like,
to be asked.
yes, someone's got it. So yeah, that's one thing that excited me. But yeah, very good point. Green butting all these solutions and things where it is making it easier for people to run their own infrastructure, and hopefully we see integration for green button, DAppBot, DexBot creation and utilization, all these sort of things. I think that's one step forward for our ecosystem, making that that transition into sort of running this infrastructure fantastic for anyone to be able to jump on and utilize.
Yep, exactly.
Nobody likes to spend 20 hours syncing a node.
Well, like I said, with the UTXO set snapshot, Nipper powers, all kinds of things, a couple of hours max. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yep.
We'll get. You know, I think that's ultimately what's most important is first principles.
Yeah.
You know, things get a lot more focused on candles and just nonsense, right? You know, but that's crypto, and nothing I can do about it other than try to, you know, focus on what matters.
Yep. That's it. The build continues here at Ergo. Hopefully it keeps going throughout the ecosystem or the industry as a whole, and some cool concepts come to light. There's a lot of research and, like I said, mindshare going forward. So industry as a whole come together and start focusing on this once again, and hopefully the user base does follow and start sort of following in that footsteps also. So once again, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure chatting once again in regards to hashing it out this week. It's been another passionate topic. Could probably go on for another hour or two here, but we'll have to wrap this up. It's been a pleasure talking once again.
Yep. See you next time.
See you guys.
Everybody.
Have a good one. Ciao.